What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So I thought I would go ahead and continue with this top 10 uh, power forwards series. So just to do a brief recap, at number 10, I had Dolph Shays. At number 9, Kevin McHale. Number 8, Dan Essel. At number 7, I have Elvin Hayes. Elvin Hayes is one of my favorite players in the history of the NBA. First of all, Elvin Hayes is one of the great Ironmen in the history of the sport. In his 16-year career, he only missed 9 games. So out of a possible 1,312 games that he could have played, he played in 1,303. Every year that he played in at least 80 games. So when it comes to Ironman, he's right up there. When I think of the great Ironman in the history of the sport, I think of him. I think of Randy Smith. I think of Dolph Shays back in the day. Playing in some 700 consecutive games. I think of AC Green. You know, he gets forgotten. AC Green is one of the great Ironmen in the history of the sport. You know, so those are people I think about. Karl Malone comes to mind too. There's some of the great Ironmen. LeBron James is up there too. Some players for some reason they don't seem to get injured, or they seem to have greater recuperative powers than other players. There's some players they just seem to, get hurt much more often and more frequently and more severe. Um, Elvin Hayes, you look at his numbers for his career, he scored 27,313 points for 21 points per game average. He corralled over 16,000 rebounds, 16,279 for a 12.5 rebound per game average. And he blocked 1,171 shots or 2 blocks per game. Look at his resume. He was an NBA champion in 1977-78 with the Washington Bullets at the time, now Washington Wizards. He was a 12-time NBA All-Star from 1968 to 1980, or the first 12 years of his career. 3-time All-NBA first team, 3-time All-NBA second team, 2-time NBA All-Defensive second team, the NBA All-Rookie first team in 1968-69, won the scoring championship his rookie year in the NBA, two-time NBA rebounding leader, 1970 1974. Matter of fact, I believe that 1969-1970 season when he led the league in rebounding, he's the only player in the Bill Russell / Wilt Chamberlain era, or 1956 to 1973, other than Wilt or Bill Russell, to lead the league in rebounding, if I'm not mistaken. His number 11 was retired by the Washington Wizards. He's on the 50th anniversary team from 1996. He was the Associate Press Player of the Year in 1968, the UPI Player of the Year in 1968, Sporting News Player of the Year in 1968, two-time consensus first-team All-America in 1967, 1968, and his number 44 is retired by the Houston Cougars. Now, um, are there any criticisms of him? One thing I remember reading about Elvin Hayes is that there are some people that thought that in games he had a tendency to fade down the stretch. Like he was a guy that, let's say, for instance, he might start off, um, let's say he started off the game, the first 3 quarters, he's 8 of 12 from the floor. Then, he might get a little trigger happy, take bad shots, and then all of a sudden, he goes from being 8 of 12 to 9 of 19. And all of a sudden, the team is down. Um, but they also don't take into account that he's shooting a lot because no one else is stepping up offensively. But the way that the media was spinning is that, well, no one else can get involved because he's shooting the basketball. That's one thing that went against him. Um, but a lot of that had to do with the fact that Elvin Hayes' personality rubbed people the wrong way. He was a very outspoken black man at a time when that was not looked favorably on to be an outspoken black man. Um, his father taught him as a young man to speak up for yourself and to carry yourself in a certain manner, not to be, you know, not to be uh, obsequious, I guess is a way of putting it. And, you know, and he would tell his teammates how he felt about certain things. If he felt like a teammate wasn't playing well, he would let you know. He didn't mince his words, and that made him kind of unpopular sometimes amongst his peers. But people always respected his work ethic, his ability, and that what makes him a Hall of Famer. He didn't start off as a natural talent. Um, he didn't start off as a great player. He was rather clumsy as a boy. He had to work to perfect his moves and to perfect his movements and his footwork. I read about how he, as a child, had to work on his most unstoppable move, his trademark, which is a turnaround fadeaway jump shot. And he didn't have the leg strength at first to do it, but he had to work on it repetitively every day until he was able to develop the strength to get that shot off and then to work on making it an accurate and dependable weapon for him when all else fails. Because of his height and because of his quickness, it was a unstoppable shot. When he got it going, um, you really couldn't stop him with that shot. And no, Michael Jordan's not the first guy to have a fall away jumper. All right, so Elvin Hayes is known as one of the greatest collegiate players of all time. By the way, okay. When you talk about the great college players in the history of the sport, you have to think about, first of all, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Don't listen to ESPN. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the greatest collegiate player ever. And then you think about somebody like Bill Walton. And of course, you have other people up there, Pete Maravich, just for how dominant he was in college. You have Christian Laettner, even though he wasn't that much of a pro. He's an all-time great collegiate player. Tim Duncan's a little bit lower in the hierarchy, but he's there. But Elvin Hayes to me is a top 3 or 4 all-time collegiate player. All right. In 1966, Elvin Hayes led the Houston Cougars into the Western Regional Semifinals of the 1966 NCAA Men's Division I basketball tournament before losing to the Pac-8 champion Oregon State Beavers. The very next year, he led the Cougars to the Final Four of the same tournament, and their semifinals lost to the eventual champion UCLA Bruins, featuring then Lou Alcindor. Hayes would take 31 shots and score 25 points and grab 24 rebounds. So he shot the ball a lot in that game. Wasn't accurate, but he shot the ball a lot. His rebounding total in that game was second to Bill Russell's Final Four record of 27. On January 20th, 1968, the Big E, which was his nickname, and the Houston Cougars faced Lou Alcindor and the UCLA Bruins in the first ever nationally televised regular season college basketball game in front of a record crowd of 52,693 at the Houston Astrodome. Elvin Hayes scored 39 points and grabbed 15 rebounds while limiting Lou Alcindor to just 15 points as Houston beat UCLA 71-69 to snap the UCLA Bruins' 47-game winning streak in what has been called the game of the century. That game helped Hayes earn the Sporting News College Basketball Player of the Year. In the rematch to the game of the century, Hayes faced Alcindor and UCLA in the 1968 NCAA Men's Division I basketball tournament at the Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena. UCLA coach John Wooden had the Bruins play a triangle and two zone defense with Alcindor playing behind Hayes and Len Shackelford fronting him. Because of this, Hayes was limited to 10 points, losing to Alcindor and the Bruins 101-69 in the semifinal game. Hayes led Houston in scoring in 1966 with 27.2 points per game. The very next year, in 1967, he averaged 28.4 points per game. But in 1968, Elvin Hayes averaged a whopping 36.8 points per game that year. For his collegiate career, Elvin Hayes averaged 31 points a game and 17.2 rebounds per game. He has the most rebounds in NCAA tournament history at 222. So, yeah, that's why I say he's one of the top, probably 3 or 4 all-time collegiate players in history. When he left college, he was selected the first overall pick in the 1968 NBA draft and the 1968 ABA draft. He was taken by the San Diego Rockets and the Houston Mavericks, respectively. But Elvin Hayes chose to join the NBA instead of the ABA in 1968, and he went on to lead the NBA in scoring with 28.4 points per game, averaging 17 rebounds per game, and was named to the NBA All Rookie Team. Excuse me. His scoring average is the fifth best ever for a rookie, and he remains the last rookie to lead the NBA in scoring average. Let me see, fifth best. So that would be, I know number one would be Wilt, 37.6. Who would be second? I think it's Walt Bellamy. So that's second. So who? I think Robinson averaged 30 as a rookie, so Oscar would be third. And who averaged more? Who else would? Who else averaged more than that? Jordan averaged 28.2, so he was fractionally less. Someone who else averaged more than that? It's not Rick Barry. I don't think it's Kareem. I don't think it's Kareem, but it might be Kareem. I have to look at it again. Um, could be Elgin Baylor. But anyway, his rookie year, he scored a career high 54 points against the Detroit Pistons on November 11th, 1968. In his second season, he led the NBA in rebounding. As I said before, he was the only player between 1956 and 1973, other than Russell or Chamberlain, to lead the league in rebounding. In 1970-71, Elvin Hayes averaged a career best 28.7 points per game. Though he didn't lead the league in scoring that year, I believe it was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar with something like 31.6. In 1971, the Rockets moved to Houston, which of course reunited Elvin Hayes to the city that he played for in college. On June 23rd, 1972, Elvin Hayes was acquired by the then Baltimore Bullets from the Rockets for Jack Marin. This now teamed him with Wes Unseld. And this tandem, one of probably the greatest front court in the NBA at that time, led the Washington Bullets to 3 NBA Finals: 1975, 1978, and 1979, and an NBA championship in 1978 over the Seattle Supersonics. During the Bullets championship season of 1978, Elvin Hayes averaged 21.8 points and 12.1 rebounds in 21 playoff games. Hayes set an NBA Finals record for most offensive rebounds in a game, 11, in the May 27, 1979 game against the Sonics. This record would later be tied by Dennis Rodman. Those who are Chicago Bulls fans remember this. He tied Elvin Hayes' record for offensive rebounds twice against the Sonics, the same team, in the 1996 NBA Finals. After his tenure with the Baltimore Bullets slash Washington Bullets, Elvin Hayes returned to the Houston Rockets in 1981 for future second round picks Charles Davis and Sidney Lowe on June 8, 1981. Elvin Hayes retired after the 1984 season, and when he retired, he was one of the great players in the history of the NBA. At the time, he had scored 27,313 points, and I believe at that time when he retired, that was after the '84 season. I think he was the third leading scorer in history at that time. I think. Uh, I believe the only people ahead of him were Kareem and Wilt. I got to think about it before. I got to think about it a little bit, but I believe Kareem and Wilt were the only ones ahead of him at that time. Um, yeah, at that time, I think they were the only ones ahead of him. His 16,279 rebounds, I believe he was third all time at the time, behind only Wilt and Bill Russell. So when he retired, Elvin Hayes was like a top five all time player at that time, damn near. You know, he's fallen off a little bit. Other players, of course, have passed him in the scoring mark, but his rebounding total of 16,279 still places very high. In fact, I think when you combine ABA and NBA, I think there's only three players ahead of him. Four, excuse me. I think it's only Kareem, Bill Russell, uh, Moses Malone, and Kareem. I think that's it. For his career, he played in 50,000 minutes exactly, which means that he averaged 38.4 minutes per game. And in his prime, he usually played over 40 minutes per game um, for his seasons. He was inducted to the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in 1990, and he's one of the greatest players in the history of this league. He helped to deliver. It was essential for delivering the one and only championship that the Washington Wizards have in their franchise in 1978. That team only went 44 and 38 during the regular season. Some of that had to do with injuries, but they really started hitting their stride late in that season, and they just went on a fantastic run during the playoffs. One of the great players in NBA history, and one of my favorite players, as I said before, top 10 all time, power forward in my opinion, the Big E, Elvin Hayes.